You know that strange, sinking feeling after hanging out with a certain group of friends? You laugh, you smile, you play along, but something in you feels off, drained, small, as if you left a piece of yourself behind in order to be included. It's easy to overlook that feeling, to dismiss it as social fatigue, or just one of those days. But what if that persistent unease isn't incidental? What if it's your mind and body quietly alerting you to something deeper? We tend to think of toxicity in extremes: betrayal, manipulation, outright cruelty. But toxic friend groups often operate in more subtle, insidious ways. They don't just break you, they wear you down, slowly and silently, and often under the illusion of connection. So, what exactly makes a friend group toxic? It's not just one bad interaction or a single falling out. A toxic friend group is defined by its ongoing patterns that undermine your self-worth, distort your voice, and keep you stuck in a version of yourself that doesn't feel honest. It's a dynamic, built not on mutual growth, but on power imbalances, competition, control, or unspoken rules that stifle authenticity. These groups can feel intoxicating at first. There's often a strong sense of belonging, inside jokes, shared histories, the comfort of familiarity. But soon, that closeness becomes a cage. You find yourself monitoring what you say, downplaying your success, tolerating jokes at your expense, pretending to agree when you don't. And over time, the group stops being a place you go to recharge and becomes a place where you lose pieces of yourself. Psychologically, this is exhausting. The mind is wired for social belonging, as explained by Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We crave connection. It's one of our most basic human drives. But when that connection comes at the cost of self-respect, it creates internal conflict. You're constantly negotiating between your need to belong and your need to be yourself. And that tug of war can lead to deep emotional fatigue, confusion, and even self-doubt. Why is it so hard to leave these groups, even when we know they're hurting us? Because social exclusion feels like a threat to our survival. In evolutionary psychology, being cast out from a group meant vulnerability, isolation, danger. So today, even though the stakes are emotional rather than physical, the fear remains deeply wired in us. We fear loneliness more than we fear mistreatment. We'd rather be tolerated than alone. And that fear, that what if I don't find better, keeps us stuck in cycles that no longer serve us. What's worse is how normalized it becomes. When criticism is constant, you start believing you deserve it. When manipulation is subtle, you begin to question your perception. When empathy is absent, you begin to think your emotions are too much. Toxic groups don't just mistreat you, they reshape your understanding of what's normal. But here's what's important to remember. Your nervous system is not overreacting. Your discomfort is data. And learning to interpret that data, the tension in your chest, the lump in your throat, the way you second-guess your joy, is the first step toward healing. The philosopher Epictetus once said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." If a friend group demands that you shrink, hide, or betray yourself just to stay included, it's not friendship, it's performance. And you deserve more than applause. You deserve real connection. We'll dive deeper into how to recognize those red flags in part 2, but for now, consider this. Belonging shouldn't require betrayal of the self. Real friendship doesn't just make space for who you are, it celebrates it. Toxic friendships don't always shout. Most often, they whisper, through jokes that sting, support that disappears when you need it most, and dynamics that leave you constantly second-guessing yourself. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something about the group feels conditional, like you're always on trial. One of the clearest signs you're in a toxic friend group is constant criticism disguised as humor. Sarcasm is their native language. They tease you about your choices, your dreams, your quirks, and when you express hurt, you're told you're being too sensitive, or that it's just a joke. But the truth is, if the joke always comes at your expense, it's not humor, it's control. These small, consistent digs chip away at your self-worth until you start doing their work for them, criticizing yourself before they even have to. Another red flag is emotional manipulation, the kind that's hard to name, but easy to feel. Maybe they guilt trip you for spending time with others. Maybe they gaslight you when you bring up an issue, turning the blame back on you. Maybe they make you feel indebted for the smallest kindness, like their support has a price tag. Over time, you begin to shrink, to mold yourself into whatever version keeps the peace. to trade authenticity for approval. In toxic friend groups, there's often a striking lack of genuine support. You celebrate a success, and it's met with silence. Or worse, subtle undermining. You open up about something vulnerable, and the conversation shifts within seconds. You start to notice that the friendship only flows one way. You listen, you care, you show up, but when you need them, they vanish. As psychologist Harriet Lerner once said, one of the most courageous things you can do is identify yourself, know who you are, what you believe in, and where you want to go. But in a toxic group, this self-identification is discouraged. They prefer you lost, unsure, and dependent. These behaviors may not seem catastrophic on their own, but over time, they add up to something deeply damaging. You begin to question your emotional reality. You wonder if your needs are too much. You find yourself editing your opinions, dimming your enthusiasm, or laughing when you want to cry, just to keep your place in the group. This psychological dissonance, the constant mismatch between how you feel and how you're expected to act, becomes a breeding ground for anxiety, low self-esteem, and even depression. The cost isn't limited to your internal world. Toxic friend groups also bleed into other relationships. You may start isolating from people who genuinely care about you, simply because they're not part of the group. Or you may begin replicating the same patterns elsewhere, tolerating disrespect, fearing confrontation, avoiding vulnerability, because you've internalized the idea that this is what connection looks like. And perhaps most painfully, you lose trust in your own instincts. The more you tolerate mistreatment, the harder it becomes to recognize it. You become fluent in rationalizing red flags. They didn't mean it. Maybe I'm overreacting. This is just how we joke around. But deep down, your body knows. The tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest before a hangout, the relief you feel when plans get canceled. These are all signals. Philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." In toxic friendships, you're constantly trying to define yourself through other people's eyes, and their lens is often distorted. You become trapped in a loop of seeking validation from those least equipped to give it. But here's what's revolutionary. Awareness is liberation. The moment you start identifying these patterns, naming them, feeling the weight of them, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to understand that love and loyalty should never come at the cost of your self-respect, that you are allowed, entitled even, to walk away from what hurts, even if it once felt like home. Leaving a toxic friend group isn't just about changing your social circle, it's about changing your relationship with yourself. And that starts with one powerful realization. You don't owe anyone access to you, especially when that access is abused. The first step in reclaiming your space is setting boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as doors that only open to those who treat you with respect. Boundaries are where your dignity lives. They say, "This is who I am. This is what I will allow. This is where I draw the line." They may be met with resistance. Toxic people often rely on your guilt, your silence, your willingness to sacrifice. But every time you honor your own limits, you rewrite the story of your worth. Prioritizing your well-being doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole. For so long, you may have bent yourself into shapes that made other people comfortable. But healing begins when you stop asking, "Will they be okay with this?" and start asking, "Am I okay with this?" Choosing environments that nourish your spirit over those that deplete it is not a betrayal of anyone, it's a commitment to yourself. The process might feel lonely at first. You may mourn the memories, the inside jokes, the version of yourself that once found belonging in that group. But as the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Letting go of what no longer fits allows space for relationships that do. That's why seeking support is crucial. Talk to a therapist, mentor, or trusted individual outside the group. Sometimes, we need a mirror held up by someone objective to see our situation clearly. Emotional abuse thrives in isolation. Validation from a healthy source can become the ladder out of the confusion. Once you step outside the storm, you can begin to rebuild your circle with intention. Start with the people who make you feel safe, even if it's just one or two. Reconnect with old friends who never asked you to shrink. Explore new communities, whether through hobbies, classes, or volunteer work. You'd be surprised how many genuine people are out there once you stop clinging to those who aren't. And most importantly, commit to authenticity over approval. The more you embrace who you truly are, not the edited version you presented to stay liked, the more you attract people who value you for you. This is the difference between being tolerated and being treasured. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties. The connections that last, the ones that heal, are not built on popularity, proximity, or performance. They're built on respect, honesty, and shared values." Real friendship doesn't require a performance. It invites your presence. If you've recognized yourself in this video, if your gut has whispered yes while your mind tried to justify, let this be your permission slip. You're allowed to outgrow people. You're allowed to change the rules of engagement. And you're allowed to choose peace over chaos, even if it means walking alone for a while. Because solitude with self-respect will always be more healing than connection built on conditions. So, take the time to reflect, to redefine what friendship really means to you, to surround yourself with people who feel like oxygen, not obligation. You deserve that. And it starts with knowing that it's not just okay to walk away. Sometimes, it's the most loving thing you can do.